Hey, welcome back to Two Super Guys Trust. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Vinny. And what is going on, guys and single probably gal out there that watches us? As Dylan talked about in his prior video, like 35% of the SPY was set to report earnings last week. To give like a brief little highlight of some of the headlines that came out of these earnings reports and how it kind of moved the market. As you can see, SPY ended up the week down 2%, which is pretty substantial for like a major index like SPY, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
Oof.
if you want the whole calendar, like this is what happened last week. Pretty crazy. I'm only going to talk about three of these companies because I have like a massive bias, and this is our channel, so I talk about whatever the hell I feel like most of the time. Okay.
To be
Uh,
fair, those three companies are like 10% of the SPY and the
yeah,
Qs. So there's that.
yeah, exactly. So this is probably like the largest or company that kind of report earnings last week, and most influential. Seen as a bellwether in many ways, and by looking at the reaction of the market compared to what the earnings actually showed is interesting. But we also get another tidbit of news just this weekend as well about highlighting what's going on with Apple, but down 4.5% a week. Kind of crazy, huh?
Yeah, I was also. The numbers actually weren't that bad. I was very surprised. I think their iPhone sales actually increased, which I was really thinking it was not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time we look at like some of these mega cap tech earnings, I'm still surprised that they're able to find customers, which is insane to me. But there are people out there apparently that like this new converts to technology. Maybe they're just walking out of the woods, or who knows what happened. But 6% revenue growth for a company like Apple, and the iPhone sales match that 6% revenue growth, which is pretty crazy. And Tim Cook talked about how the generations have had kind of successive improvement. So at this point in the cycle, iPhone 16 is outselling where iPhone 15 was, and iPhone 15 was doing better than iPhone 14, which is just bananas.
Yeah,
Mild
that's crazy
iterations.
to me. That's wild.
Yeah, slightly better cameras, and somehow they still manufacture this. So this is where you're looking at as far as the numbers. Like I said, 6% on the headline number there, but they managed to beat on terms of EPS, then beat on revenue, they beat on the iPhone revenue. So this is really solid. They had the gross margin was up slightly compared to where it was supposed to be. People have talked about how services in itself would be like a Fortune 100 company just by itself as an entity at this point, which is crazy.
Do you pay any Apple services?
Yeah, I do. I have I can't remember what it's called, but it's the second highest bundle, I think.
Okay. I paid the
Yeah.
dollar a month for the data, but that's it.
Yeah, I have that Apple TV as well. And then like my wife is a big Apple Music fan. That's
Got
the
it.
one we use. But this weekend, because Berkshire Hathaway loves to report earnings on the weekend, we got a little inkling into Warren Buffett and his continue sale of kind of Apple stock. He now has like over $300 billion in cash that he's sitting on here. But even still in this quarter, it looks like he sold another like 25% of his Apple position, which is
That
bananas.
that's after he already sold
Like
about
half.
nearly half. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
he's down. So that's a okay. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I mean, personally, I owned 120 shares of Apple a couple, like 2 years ago. I'm down to 20. I got 100 called away, and I've just left it that way. And
Yeah.
I chose to buy a small cap index fund instead with the 100 share worth. But yeah,
It's it's
continuing.
it's tough for me at that price to buy. It's too much. It's
Yeah,
just it doesn't to me. It's way too high.
yeah, I hear you. We can do a separate if people really want to see like what my buy or sell price would be on a company. I can do one. This is one of the mega cap tech companies that actually had a good week or a good reaction after their earnings. Googl, popped 1.6% for the week, which is solid. Somehow they're still able to manage massive growth, which it's just crazy to me. With so much touch on a Google platform right now, but they actually had pretty solid cloud growth, which is the one that people were really hoping to see. 35% growth in that one sector of the business, which is highlights our Alibaba's woeful underperformance, but that's a separate video coming soon. Uh, but the thing people are looking at here, right? EPS 212 versus 185. Blew it away on the top line there, and revenue 88 billion versus 86 billion. They beat top and bottom line substantially.
That I want to know if there's like a comparison of greatest acquisitions of all time, because YouTube has to be one of those. 'Cause
Yes,
I believe they bought it for like $1 billion, right?
I don't know what the number was.
It's
I think you're
let
thinking
me
of
look it up.
Meta buying Instagram. I think that one was a
No, no,
billion.
no.
Um, but it is definitely on the list. I have seen people make those sort of lists before, and the Google
1.6.
acquisition of 1.6 of
1.6.
YouTube is on that list. But
Man, it's
uh,
crazy.
company continuing to perform fantastic well. For quite a while, Google it has been one of the cheaper of the mega cap tech stocks, and I have to run the numbers on it individually now. But it's one that my most recent, I guess, mega cap tech buy was Google, and sitting on a nice, return at this point.
And
Um,
more importantly, if you look at the chart, Google Google went up like 5%. It wasn't 2%, but the entire market was down. So now they're having relative strength in a
mhm.
relative weak market. So that means if there is a bull run in tech at some point, Google's most likely going to be doing better than its peers because it's as
Yeah,
of right now, a lot of things got hammered. But it's still fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
Google's at a point now where their biggest enemy is governments. The EU and now the US is going after them, seeking to potentially break up their monopoly. I mean, the 15% growth, more than double what Apple was, and like their PE is lower last. So
Yeah,
it's hard to not love that when that happens for a company.
absolutely.
Yeah, but now the final one of the week, Meta. All right, and some people arguing one of the most misunderstood. Now, I absolutely am so glad I bought this company when I did, and still continue to hold them. Now, it's always funny to, especially as we come up on the presidential election here, thinking about how media sources choose their headlines. So look at this headline: Meta misses on user growth, warns of 2025 jump in AI spending. Right?
Okay.
That's a relatively negative headline. You're like, oh crap, that's not so good. I'm a little bit worried. Like, what the hell's going on here? Dylan and I have talked about this before. The fact that they're still able to find new users and put them on that platform is just bananas to me. Especially 3 billion daily active users, and they still
Yeah,
grew 5% in a
we're
year.
at slightly under half of the entire planet. So it's,
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to slow down at some point.
yeah,
It's can't. All
yeah.
right.
Bananas. Like that's such a ridiculous take to me. It's just like you're unserious at that point, right? So when you also look down like at what the actual numbers of the reporting were, look at this. EPS blew it out of the water, right? $6 versus 5.25, right? And then revenue 40.6 billion basically versus 40.3 expected. And this is a company that was dead, right? 3 years ago. This is
Yeah.
like before this current time period, they had what I think one quarter over $40 billion in revenue, and I was like, oh, that's just expected, and they actually beat it. And their expectation for the fourth quarter of this year is even better than was expected.
This stock was probably our best call because we
Mm.
we had mentioned it at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's. I mean,
absolutely.
also, I don't think that increase in AI spending is new. Maybe the specific amount, but
Yeah.
Zuckerberg has been very, very clear with Reality Labs, with AI spending, that he's going to keep the pedal on and he's going to keep doing it as he
Hmm.
sees a huge future and special things that can happen. So I don't. Maybe it's the amount that's different, but the sentiment has not changed.
Yeah, it's just I think it's a story of headlines and perception. So 19% growth. Okay, that's the largest number in case you were keeping track of top line growth in the three companies we've talked about basically today. All right, um, their net income up
Jesus.
35%. Okay, but like this is when you start to get like ridiculous, right? Uh, Lowest year over year growth for net income since the second quarter of 2023. Mind you,
Okay.
like that was just over a year ago. First of all, but like 35% growth. Oh, that's just 35% growth. I mean, that's hardly anything. I mean, you just shut the doors and close the business at this point. Ridiculous.
That definitely reminds me of NFL stats. I
Yeah.
heard one the other day is player hasn't had this many yards and touchdowns since week 14 of last year. So like 9 games ago,
Yeah.
basically. All right.
Yeah.
So not that
Yeah. Yeah.
special.
Yeah. Like I said, 5% growth, which is just ridiculous to me. Um, so they raised the capex spending for next year between 38 and 40 billion, up from 37 to 40 billion.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So not at all.
Like $1 billion on the low end from what they had previously reported, and that was that little like tidbit made it into the headline of this earnings like article.
So this is what they meant by they're going to significantly increase AI spending. When in
Hmm.
reality, it's actually in the exact same range quoted, just
Hmm.
tighter.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
and
that's
yeah,
misleading as hell. That's dumb.
it's just going to be high going forward too, right? Like, who is surprised by this? I mean, this has been completely clear to anyone that's been a Meta shareholder for more than 15 seconds.
Wait,
But
wait,
it
wait
made
till
it
they
in the
do.
headline, and it was like, oh my god, like I don't know what's going on with this company. The stock just did not like it. You know, we were touching 600, now we're back to 470. Just crazy,
We're
bananas.
gonna we're gonna hit 39 to 40 billion next as they
Yeah,
get more accurate. It's gonna be a big problem.
yeah. Yeah, I guess I said it, and they bumped up the guidance for revenue. I want to say for the fourth quarter of this year. So that's the last
Sucking.
slide. I just it's just funny to me how they pick and choose the data points to give you an article that sounds like super inflammatory as opposed to saying like, oh yeah, Meta, like amongst like the FANG stocks, this is like fantastic growth and like the profitability is growing significantly. I didn't look at Amazon or at Microsoft for this. I don't own any Amazon. I own only a tiny bit of Microsoft, so they're not ones I follow as closely. But it's just funny to me.
Yeah, that guy's short, Meta, for sure.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that makes sense. That's absurd. That's stupid.
yeah,
Doesn't
I
make
love
any
it.
sense.
All
Yeah.
right, guys. Let us know what you think about these stocks down in the comments down below. Have a good night.